got the wrong owl, but I can't complain too much. I was looking for an owl, I got an owl. Most of the time when I'm looking for a bird, I simply don't find it. At least I got a substitute this time. The eastern screech owl. The eastern screech owl is a small, stocky owl commonly found in eastern North America. It has the widest ecological range of any owl in its region, living east of the Rocky Mountains from southern Canada all the way to Mexico. It inhabits wooded areas below 1,500 meters, and it doesn't care where. It could be a forest, but it could also be your backyard. And it typically nests in tree cavities or human-made structures like bird boxes. It's pretty easy to get an eastern screech owl to nest in your box. I should do that. I could build one. I could build it. And it is often the most common avian predator in wooded, urban, and suburban areas. And yes, it's a bird of prey. By any definition, a lot of prey. These guys are socially and genetically monogamous, which basically means that a pair's young is almost certainly related to both of the parents, and they breed from March to June. Their diet is the most varied of any North American owl. I said owl, not mammal. They sounded the same. And it includes a wide array of vertebrates and invertebrates. But a lot of vertebrates, a lot of mice. Their most common calls are a monotone trill and a whinny, especially during pair formation and juvenile dispersal, although they also produce barks, hoots, squeals, and screeches. It's a screech owl. They actually have two distinct color morphs, a rufous one and a gray one, which is unlike any other owl in North America. You look at the two and you think they're different owls. These guys measured between about 16 and 25 centimeters in length, so not huge, but not tiny, with females typically being larger than the males. But other than that, the sexes look alike, and you get them in either the gray or the red morphs, with some brown in-betweens. Although the rufous morph is much more common in the southeastern edge of their range. So, the eastern screech owl is a small, stocky owl, and it has prominent ear tufts, bold breast streaking, yellow eyes, a pale yellowish green or gray bill, large feathered feet, and typical owl feather structure. Wow, that's hard to say. Typical owl feather structure. 10 primaries, 12 to 14 secondaries, and 12 tail feathers. And it's probably either going to be gray or a brown-red. And the gray morphed individuals are somewhat hard to tell apart from the western screech owls, except if you're in the east, it's probably an eastern one. But you can always tell them apart based on their bill color and their song. And in northeastern Mexico, it can also be confused with the whiskered screech owl. I like whiskers. Not enough birds have whiskers. And there does seem to be some geographic variation in their plumages, but that's really hard to distinguish from the polymorphism I mentioned earlier. If they're gonna look different anyways, how geography affects how different they look is difficult to determine. I hope I said that right. Juveniles, again, as always, look just sort of like duller adults. They have simpler markings. They then go through a formative plumage before getting to their definite basic plumage. And adults differ from first-year birds typically just by feather quality and pattern uniformity. And these guys do have a complete annual molt once they reach adulthood. They've got the couple of molts before they reach adulthood, too. But they are sexually monomorphic, even though the species as a whole has two morphs. And though the gray morph is more common, there's simply more birds with that gray morph. It seems that the rufous phenotype actually has the dominant allele, but because there are in-between brown morphs, it does seem that there is a more complicated allelic structure underneath all this. Get on that, geneticists. Bird geneticists. Do we have those as a specific subgenre of ornithologists? And it does seem that the morph variation frequency is controlled by geography and climate. The red morph is more common in humid, warm, cloudy regions, while the gray morph is more common in cold and dry areas. And it does seem that the rufous feathers of the rufous morph are simply less insulating and wear more easily. And it is more common to find rufous females than rufous males. As I said, males are typically larger. No. As I said, females are typically larger than males, being about 18% heavier on average. And it does seem that larger females lay larger eggs, incubate more efficiently, and survive food shortages better. So basically, everything about these birds varies based on where they are and how warm it is. Their feathering, their size, even their songs. About 36% of the population range-wide is in the rufous morph. And if you look at the mid-latitude eastern populations, about 50 to 70% of them are in the rufous morph, with the western edge populations having less than 15% of the rufous morph. That all comes out in the wash to be about 36% species-wide. They really care about these morphs, okay? There seems to have been a lot of study on the polymorphism of these birds. And all this clinal variation means there's a fair amount of debate about what's considered a subspecies, but there are 5 currently recognized. These guys are owls. Don't know if I've said that yet. Which means they're in the order Strigiformes, which was once thought to be closely related to nightjars, but molecular studies have linked them more closely to mouse birds now, which is interesting, and I understand the connection to the nightjars. They do sort of look like nightjars. It's all those birds that look like they're part of a tree, you know? These guys also form a superspecies with the western screech owl, the Balsas screech owl, and the Pacific screech owl. And they were all considered actually to be one species until 1983, which is not that long ago. Longer ago than I've existed, but, still not that long ago. I've already said a fair amount about their habitat and range, and they are non-migratory. They stick where they stick. And basically, you're going to find them where there's trees. They are not picky. Trees, trees, trees. And as I already said, they really like tucking themselves away into something, the crevice of a tree or a bird box. They sort of squish in there. And surprisingly, for how much they like trees, occupancy doesn't always increase when there is higher forest cover. It was found, oddly, in parts of New York and Connecticut that occupancy was actually highest where there was less than 10% forest cover. So they need some trees, but they don't need too many trees. Let's get a documentary that's inside the brain of an owl. And although they don't migrate, if there is severe weather or food shortages, they will move from their typical home range. And if there is bad weather, you're more likely to see a farther dispersal of juveniles than when there's good weather. And so these irregular movements can make it seem like they're migrating, but it's really just a temporary response to an environmental stress. These guys are definitely birds of prey, which means I'm going to have a fun time talking about their diet. And they have the most varied diet of any North American owl, with them eating at least 138 known vertebrate species, and even more with invertebrates. Technically, their most frequent prey are invertebrates, insects, crayfish, earthworms, that sort of thing, but they're pretty small. So by biomass, it's a lot of animals and songbirds. Yeah, I don't know how many earthworms make up one deer mouse, but it's a few. They will occasionally also eat reptiles, amphibians, fish, and even other owls. And as you might be able to guess from how much variation there is for these guys, their diets range geographically and seasonally because they're just going to take what's there. Yeah, they are a classic sit-and-wait owl predator, and they hunt mostly at night, although sometimes crepuscularly. That's a great word. Crepuscularly? Is it a real word? It should be if it's not. It perches typically about 1.5 meters to 2.5 meters above the ground and gets prey within 6 meters of its perch, or at least attacks within 6 meters of its perch. Often midair, usually grabbing its prey with its talons, not its beak. And it'll frequently hunt on or near the ground, with about 2/3 of its strikes being prey on the ground. A mouse is going to be on the ground, a songbird could be in the air. They also will take fish and tadpoles from water, sort of bald eagle style, in shallow waters. And larger prey is killed by biting the head or the neck, and bird and rodents are typically eaten head first. These guys have symmetrical ears, which is slightly odd for an owl. You heard me right. Having symmetrical ears is the odd thing. Owls very often have their ears at 2 different heights on their heads, which means because most owls are nocturnal predators, they typically rely a lot on their hearing to identify prey as opposed to vision. Not a lot of light at night. Don't know if you knew that. So a lot of owls have adapted to have one ear opening higher than the other on their head, which means that sound from, with any luck, their prey reaches their ears at slightly different times, which allows them to pinpoint the location of their prey more easily. But these guys have symmetrical ears, which implies that they rely more heavily on vision than a lot of owls. Although that doesn't mean their hearing's bad. They still have pretty good hearing. It's just not as essential as it is for a lot of owls. They prefer small prey when they can get it because it's easier to catch and safer to catch. But if they get larger prey over about 40 grams, they will often cache it. In cold conditions especially, these guys can get to eating up to a third of their body weight every night, and adults will often lose weight in winter and during nesting, and the higher body mass a female is able to maintain, the more likely she is to have reproductive success. And to go back to the polymorphism, because that's what these birds are about, at cold temperatures, the rufous morphs actually have a higher metabolic rate than the gray morphs. And because of all the weird stuff they eat, they have to make pellets to get rid of the stuff that they can't digest, and they typically make 1 to 2 a day. And they will frequently drink and bathe in shallow waters and even suburban bird baths. I hate doing sounds. I sound ridiculous when I talk about sounds, so let me do it as quick as I can. Their main vocalizations are first a monotonic trill, which is used for mate attraction, pair bonding, that other one, mate attraction, pair bonding, nest site advertisements, and singing duels with neighboring males. Sometimes you just gotta duel. And a whinny, which, yes, supposedly sounds like a horse's whinny, which is mainly used for territorial defense, especially at longer distances. Their other calls include, I'm gonna forget them all, hoot, bark, screech, rasp, chuckle, rattle, and squeal. And it does seem that these calls can escalate progressively as threat levels rise, from hoot to bark to screech. And they do sometimes hiss as well, which is linked to threat displays, and it happens often when they're handled by humans. Don't go grab any screech owls, please. These guys are both happy to walk and to swim. No, they're not. These guys are both happy to walk and to fly, with adults and juveniles often walking, running, and hopping to get prey on the ground. And that is how flightless chicks first leave the nest, by hopping to branches nearby, using their wings, feet, and bill to climb. And their flight is typically using rapid wing beats, very little gliding, and are usually done low beneath the canopy, and they are highly maneuverable birds. They pivot on a dime. And their flights are often in this distinctive arc or U shape between roosts and their cavities, likely to conceal the location of their nests. And they sometimes hover when they're looking for prey, but not that often. And they don't swim. None has been reported. Promise. And their roosting sites often shift daily for comfort and concealment, which means it's hard to find them the next day. If you saw one today, unless it's their nest, it probably won't be there tomorrow. And when a female is incubating, males will often roost near her to keep an eye on her. And in cooler months, birds will often sunbathe, usually going right to the front of their little cavity and ruffling their feathers towards the sun. But as I said, they are nocturnal birds. Their activity happens at night. And typically, their hunting happens within the first 4 hours of nightfall. They will defend their nest, with males often being more vigorous than females about it, and their threat displays include bill clapping, hissing, feather raising, wing spreading, and talon strikes. Although their threat posture doesn't appear that threatening to me, they will do it at humans and cats and snakes, whatever's going to disturb their nest. They've got several typical postures they do, most of which I have talked about in one way or another: sunbathing, threat displays. The last main sort of position you'll see them in, besides their sunbathing, their threat display, and just normal relaxing on a branch, is their camouflage stance, where they erect their ear tufts and squint their eyes to try to look like a piece of bark. This is quite possibly why people thought they were related to nightjars, because that is what a nightjar looks like. These guys have lifelong pair bonds. Divorce is uncommon, although they are typically solitary, except for nesting and family rearing. They will fight for tree space with squirrels and European starlings, which I don't know why that's funny. Represents the real estate market, I guess. And oddly enough, adults are known to bring blind snakes into their nests and alive and leave them there, with the snake consuming insects and nest debris and possibly boosting the breeding success of the owls. The predators for these guys are larger owls, hawks, raccoons, snakes, and opossums. The predators include snakes, so why do they bring snakes? I'm not an owl. Males are typically the ones to choose the nesting site, and they prefer deep cavities in trees with small openings as high as they can get them, basically. High enough to reduce what predators can get there. And they are happy to use bird boxes. There's a large amount of time where you can find them laying eggs from late December, which is rare, to mid-August, typically replacement clutches at that point. They typically lay 2 to 6 eggs and incubate them for 27 to 34 days, and it's always the female that incubates them. And then the chicks brood for about 2 weeks. And females will brood chicks that have hatched for about 1 to 2 weeks, at which point the chicks start thermoregulation on their own. And these guys go from 13 grams at hatching to about 120 grams by the time they fledge. And there's about a 25% partial brood loss rate due to all the fun bird reasons. And during this whole process, males will bring food for the female and the chicks. After they fledge, which takes about a month, they do stay dependent on their parents for about 8 to 10 weeks. And they are pretty weak flyers. Once they do fledge, they can fly, but they're not great at it, with just out of the gate fledglings having about a 42% capture efficiency for their prey, and getting to about an 83% capture efficiency by 7 to 9 weeks, which is the adult rate. And once they are no longer dependent on their parents, they disperse typically about 2 to 4 kilometers away. These guys do not have great survival rates, with only about a third of first-year birds surviving, and adult annual survival being only 55 to 67%. But they can live up to 20 years, which means there could be a bird alive that was born while I was in elementary school. I'd love to meet him. So upstate New York has had a rather disgusting winter this year, and I have been inside for too long. So on a still miserably cold day, I decided I've got to get out, I've got to find something. I've been sitting here for too long. And I looked at my local rare bird alerts, and I found that there were reports of a boreal owl in Webster Park the day before. So I went, okay, I'm going to Webster Park. Let me see if I can find him. Probably not, but I'll see what I can do. Notice how I said a boreal owl. I've been talking about an eastern screech owl, but I was looking for a boreal owl. So I drove out to Webster Park all by my lonesome because nobody I know was crazy enough to go with me. And the snow was almost up to my knees at some places. It was hard to get through. But somebody had seen this owl at the top of the hill that they've got there, the sledding hill they called it, and it's true, there was a lot of sled tracks, and I started walking around. I was there for probably about 10 minutes, walking along the edge of this hill where all the trees were, trying to find it, when I noticed a couple of other people seemingly doing the same thing as me, and one of them had seemed to spot something. So I, sort of like a creep, stayed, 100 feet back and tried to see what they were looking at, not to sneak up on them. And these two women were actually looking at a tree that was on the slope of the hill. So we were on the top, there was the bottom, it was about halfway up the hill. So they ran down the hill, so I snuck up to the tree because I no longer had to worry about disturbing the humans, or them disturbing me. And I could see what they were looking at. It was a little round ball of fluff. And I went, oh great, I found the boreal owl. Well, that other bird lady found the boreal owl. But here it is. And eventually I gained the courage to slightly fall down the hill and go speak to these two women. And they were very nice. All birders are nice that I've met. I'm just shy. And we actually got a really good look at this guy. But he turned out to be an eastern screech owl. We were all there for the same report. We were all looking for this boreal owl. But all that was there was this eastern screech owl. I say that as if I'm disappointed. I was not disappointed. I have gotten a picture one other time of an owl. It was a barred owl, and it was blurry and from afar. So, in my mind, this is the first owl I've ever gotten real pictures of, and he's just beautiful. You can see all his plumage that's blending into the bark. He's not even trying to blend into the bark. He's pretty relaxed there, sunbathing in loaf mode for an owl. And he was gorgeous. It made me happy. The other women kept going, trying to find the boreal owl. At this point, I had already been there for about 20 minutes, and I couldn't feel my toes, and the boreal owl probably wasn't there. So I went home. I did let them go, though, and I got some of my own pictures, being happy to sort of fall down in the snow and look stupid while I did it, now that all other humans had walked away. You can see I was not concerned as to how much snow I got on my pants. And he was lovely. I got some far away shots. I went much closer, so you kind of look up at his face. I was very happy. It was the first real owl I got. I'm still going to keep an eye out for saw-whet owls, which are supposedly all over the place, not really during this season, up by me. And snowy owls we get up here too. And all the owls. Why am I listing owls that I'm looking for as if I'm going to not look for the rest of them? But those are the ones that I have in mind that I might find. As always, I don't know anything about this. I don't know why I'm talking. I just love all birds, even when they're the wrong birds, and love sharing it with people. And remember, they're nocturnal, so feel free to take a picture, but let sleeping owls lie.